Alrighty, welcome to our next audiobook. Well, next to my channel. I am the Epileptic Explorer, and tonight we will continue our reading in Last Days by Adam Neville. This is going to definitely be a multi-week. It may take a couple months to get us through this book, but it's okay. We are going through this. I hope you all are very excited about this book. I've been getting very curious about how this book's going to play out. And I've been wanting to know what happens in this book. Every chapter I read has been very, very, very riveting and very, very spooky. And right now I've got a bit of an ambiance, which is a horror ambiance, so we're going to be trying this out to see how it plays out. Anywho, hope you all enjoy this reading for tonight. We probably, let me see, it's 8:02. We might do, it might be an hour, maybe a little over an hour, but we'll see how far we get in this book. So without further ado, let us continue reading Last Days. Chapter 9. Caen, Normandy, June 16th, 2011 at 2 a.m. When Kyle came out of the bathroom with a towel tied around his waist, one half of the rum in the Sailor Jerry bottle was gone. Wrapped in the other bath sheet, Dan sat cross-legged on the floor, a coffee cup by his huge knee. He was playing back Kylie's footage in the temple barn. Kyle's footage in the temple barn. Kyle heard his own tiny voice rise from the laptop speakers. Not sure what I'm seeing here, but it's inside the Gatherings temple. On the wall here, what looks like a figure. In one corner of the room, a plastic supermarket bag bulged with blood-stained clothes, like the bag was a revenant nothing dared go near. It sagged alone on the only bit of floor space not littered with equipment and the dross that spilled from the rucksacks. Kyle sat on the foot of the bed, cupped his cheeks on his hands. Wow. Bit shaky, mate, but dark too. You surprised? We can use some of it. Kyle knew Dan only inspected the footage to keep his mind preoccupied with technical matters, to evade scrutiny of what ranked as the worst day of their lives. Since the return to the hotel in Caen, they had not been able to speak to each other, let alone discuss what they'd endured for the previous 5 hours. I'm sorry, mate, Kyle said. I didn't hear you back there at the farm. If I had, I would have come straight away. You must have been with him for ages. Over an hour. Trying to get it off his leg, shouted myself hoarse. He could have bled to death. When Kyle reached Dan in the meadow, the first thing he noticed about his friend were his arms. They were wet to the elbow. It looked like he had been pressing grapes. Dan sat back from the camera, rubbed his eyes. Couldn't get it apart off his leg. I still feel sick. It was the sound more than anything. The sound of the trap closing on his leg made me feel sick, right to the tips of my fingers. I can't get the sound out of my head. Kyle nodded. The events of the night were held in a series of haphazardly edited images that jolted him, then turned his stomach each time his recalcitrant memory replayed fragments. The rum, half of a pizza, the hot shower, the basic comfort of their hotel room, had all been unable to penetrate through his shock for more than a few minutes. Kyle stared between his bare feet, saw again his ungainly movements through the field towards Dan. the prod of the stick at the hidden meadow floor, the clench of terror in his stomach at the certainty of more traps still hidden in the long grass. Dan's wild face in the silent twilight, his friend's eyes tearing up as he drew closer. And he'd never seen Dan cry before. Dan's dark hands, the horizon a thin line of fire, the distant bray of a goat they never saw. And then the small, huddled figure of Gabriel, buried in the long grass, the terrible wetness of the black trousers about his thin leg, the horrible rattle of the iron trap in the grass, raising the frail body from the earth, the face so white, the tiny mouth flecked with spittle, the keening sound that came out of him like he was a dying animal. They never found his glasses, all followed by the uprooting of the iron stake and chain attached to the trap, and the lifting of that broken doll body over the gate. For Gabriel was sick onto the arm Kyle had fixed under the little man's hot armpit. Then Gabriel fainted, and they believed he had died. There was the throwing of the bags that Kyle had dragged to the point of total exhaustion through the meadow, into the boot of the minivan. Dan being sick too, over the passenger side door, them getting lost in the lanes around the farm, Gabriel waking in his cries of pain on the back seat of every bump in the road they traversed, the trap and the smashed shin bone covered in Dan's coat. There was the not knowing about hospitals or doctors, the crushing, confounding ignorance of first aid, of what to do or where to go, the banging on the doors of the gray village buildings, the failure to communicate with the man who came to the only door that opened in that desolate cluster of miserable houses, while Dan sat in the road, silent. The whispers in French between the bald man and Gabriel had begun to shiver on the back seat, in whose face went the gray of the landscape's chalky stone. Then came the fetching of tools and the unshackling of those rusted iron skeiths from the little leg, the flopping of the small foot in the Teddy sports shoe, black with old blood. Ambulance? None. Why? None. The hopeless asking for directions, the cries of Gabriel drowning them out, their following of the rusted Citroën to the hospital, driven by the bald Frenchman who spoke no English. The eternity of the drive under a dark sky, and then just more of it, on and on, under a black sky. Was the journey ever going to end? Where was he taking them? But then there was the hospital with its green and yellow lights, and he and Dan began to chant of panic talk and gibberish, fired at little Gabriel. Hospital. Hold on, mate. Hospital, mate. Nearly there. You're gonna be fine. Here we go. Kyle sighed, cradled his ribs, poured himself a generous measure of Sailor Jerry, and gulped it at it like it was water. Gasped after the afterburn, as the taste of Christmas and the Caribbean filled his body with warmth. Finish the pizza, Dan. Can't face it, Dan closed his eyes, groaned. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do anything. Didn't know whether to move him to the car, but you had the keys, and I was convinced there were traps everywhere, all around us. I couldn't move. Just kept calling for you, mate. I never heard a word. How was that possible? I should have heard you. At the hospital, there had been a long, heated exchange between the doctor and the Frenchman from the village. Kyle and Dan had no French. They had nothing but a minivan full of film equipment and blood. He remembered his relief at hearing that Gabriel would live. The news delivered in nonchalant broken English from a black nurse at the hospital. But the leg gone from a doctor had then indicated a cutting motion at his own knee. amputation. What will happen to that tiny foot in the white running shoe? Kyle had thought in his shock, his horror, his cold stupefaction at the news. And then he and Dan had waited in the hospital for another 3 hours. Still bloodied, faint with hunger and shock, pacing the tarmac insensible, drifting through rage and shock and exhaustion. Kyle had then called Max from the car park, and Max had been unable to react for a long while to the information Kyle spat into the phone about the traps you had us all walk through. Eventually, in a faint, tired voice, Max had said, "The path. I told you to stay on the path. There was no path. Now look, I've never been there. How would I know? Why? Why have you never been there? Will he live? Yes, but he's lost that leg. Lost it. Amputated from the knee. Oh no. Oh yes. Insurance? You are all insured. Well, tell that to Gabriel and his 90-year-old mum he's looking after." "What were you thinking, Max?" There had been a long silence. "Max! Max!" Kyle had cried into the phone. Even now, she can what? Can't what? Can't hear? Did you see anything? See anything? What do you mean?" "Unusual." "Yes, mate. As a matter of fact, I did. Her bed is still in that ferment, and it was full of toads, worms, snakes, who knows? And there are things on the walls. The walls, Max. The temple. The bedroom. What are they? Those figures? And the place. The farm is not right. It's just not right." "What do you mean?" Kyle had sat down on the tarmac. By that time, he did not care about what people thought of him. The wary paramedics who walked by, the people going in and out of the accident and emergency entrance. Gabriel freaked out. Said something about them still being there, right around the time we arrived. Then he wouldn't go inside the buildings, and it was like something was there, inside the temple. I heard someone in there when I was filming, and in Catherine's cottage, downstairs, someone came in, but they weren't there when I went down. I'm confused, Max. It's freaking me out. What is wrong with this place? What is it? We'll talk when you come home." "Home? What do we do, Max? With Gabriel? What?" "I'll take care of it. Just come home as planned tomorrow. We'll meet when you are rested. You've done enough for one day. I thank you for that. Text me the name of the hospital, the phone number. I need to go now. I have something else to attend to." "Attend to? What's more important than this? I want answers, mate." "Kyle, please. You're emotional. Wouldn't you be? After what we've been through?" "I understand. I do. But there has been some more unfortunate news. Today. Affecting our film." "What?" "Sister Isis. Susan White. She went in the night." "Went? Went where?" "What?" "She died, Kyle." "I don't know about this anymore, mate." Kyle turned his head from the laptop screen, on which he was immersed in his rough cut. He looked at Dan, who finally swallowed the mouthful of pizza he chewed. "The film." Dan looked at Kyle, deep into his friend's bloodshot eyes. "Feels wrong." "No way. And Max isn't telling us everything. He's holding out on us. Has been from the start." "What about?" "Beats me, mate. I don't know. He freaked out when I spoke to that barrister. So that was just digressing. But she lived there, in the building that was the gathering's first temple. How is that not relevant? And what she said about the walls, stains, whatever they are, how they just appeared with things in them. There were no leaks, no faulty wires, never were. We never got it in detail, but I'm going to take a running guess that what we saw in the Clarendon Road basement is not dissimilar to the walls in that barn. Kyle pointed at the laptop screen to emphasize his point. Rachel Phillips heard sounds too. What we heard, that figure, outside the penthouse. So it's all connected to the gathering. Gotta be. The myths might not be myths. You believe I'm even saying this? Which is what the whole film is supposed to be about. What Max wanted. Bit too convenient, if you ask me. And then, out here? I mean, those things on the walls. No way they're watermarks. No way. They're drawn on. Who'd want to draw that though? They must have been bat crazy. They're not drawn on. Come again? Kyle shook his head, swallowed. They're in the stone. I touched one. It's like they're burned into the actual stone. There's no point. It's like a scorch. That stinks. Like something's died in the wall. Dan blew out a long stream of air. This room no smoking? No smoking? Kyle nodded. Rats. Light up. Dan clambered to his feet and made his way to Kyle's packet of Lucky Strikes on the bedside table. You want one? Kyle nodded, then caught the cigarette Dan tossed at him. Dan paced about. In silence, Kyle watched his friend's hairy feet in order to avoid the sight of his hairy belly. Dan's speech was slurred. His cheeks flushed. This is too freaky. I mean, Gabriel nearly died. If I hadn't plugged the bleeding with my shirt, he'd have bled out. Doctor said so. Or mimed as much. Susan Isis, or whatever she's called, is dead. Dead. As well as some other old hippie mate of Max's involved in this trash. This feels dangerous. I know you have debts and $100 grand and a lot of cash, but we should walk. Just walk, mate. Kyle bit down on his irritation and his disappointment. That Dan would even suggest such a thing as abandoning the film. And what a film! Dan was upset. That was natural. But he had just suggested the unspeakable. Dude, we're in no place to be making major decisions here. Today was the worst day of my life. Today was all messed up. He'd never seen Dan like this before. Carl chose his words carefully, softened his voice. Agreed. It was. But mate, you have to admit, despite all the trash we've been through today, this is dynamite. I mean, we've been in 2 shoots, and on both of them we've picked something up on camera. How often does that happen? Never. That's how often. It's never happened as far as I know. Ever. To anyone with a camera rolling. A horror film with a big studio might get similar effects, but these aren't effects. Dan closed his eyes and looked like he wanted to put his fingers in his ears too. Kyle. And the interviews have been freaky, but it's fantastic material. You could not make this up. It's like we've been waiting for our whole lives to get a piece of this. Coven and Bloody Frenzy, we never got so much as a sniff of the paranormal. Some good interviews, some nice shots of murder sites, 2 cracking films. But this is on another level. Another level, mate. This is the making of us. This is the big time. From here on out, we will have officially made it. Agreed. But, Kyle, of the two former members of the last gathering we filmed. Agreed. But Kyle, of the two former members of the last gathering we filmed, one is dead, and the other lost his leg this afternoon. Dan beseeched Kyle's face for an explanation. It wasn't forthcoming. Dan. When we shoot a scene, we hope to achieve something. We have a goal. We want a disclosure that creates a story. The story. Agreed? Well, we're getting that every time. This is telling us more than we asked for. Gabriel may have shot his bolt, but the farm told us things without saying much of any use. We're shooting one long take almost every time. This is too good to let go, mate. There's something about this story, this experience they all shared. No one is goofing around or trying to make themselves look good. It's like they are compelled to confess. How often have we seen that? Precisely. And you want to can it? You have got to be kidding me, big man. Dan stared at the floor. I don't know. I need to put some space between myself and this place. And then I need to have a good drink, a good think. Your call. But I can't do it without you. There's no time. No way I could replace you. We gotta be in America in 2 days. Kyle topped up Dan's mug with rum. And like you said, I have no choice. I'm 30 grand in debt. I need this film. I know, mate. It's just, I don't think I can sleep on it. Please. Don't do this to me. Don't do this to me, Dan. Mate. There's more. What? In the hospital. When you were outside talking to Max, I was wondering what the French guy who helped us was saying to the doctor. They were talking for ages. The guy was really getting worked up. So I asked the doctor about the farmer, what the farmer had been saying. I was getting a hunch it might have been something about the farm. Kyle swallowed. And? Doctor's English wasn't great, but the French guy from the village had been telling him that the birds never came back. Something like that. The birds never came back. To the farm, I'm guessing. And he said the dogs will never walk there, or go there. This is blowing my mind, Dan. It's amazing. And then there's this. Dan walked over to his bedside table and picked up his iPhone. The message must have come in this afternoon. Didn't even think to check it until you were having a shower. But it's a message from Fingermouse. It's about the Clarendon Road rushes. Dan scrolled through a menu on his iPhone, then handed the phone to Kyle. The message read, "Been calling you all day. You gotta see this." While you two were feeling your pants like a couple of schoolgirls, there's some strange trash going down in the background. On 3 audio tracks. No way that's ambient. You must have played a CD. And the other guy in there with you, the druggie that looks like he got up and walked out of the sarcophagus at the British Museum, ain't all there. It's no junkie. Blown up the image and bits of him are not there. Missing. Transparent. How did you do it? Please tell me you did it and are laughing right now. FM. Neither of them were laughing. Dan blinked at Kyle in silent incomprehension. What does he mean? Kyle felt himself go white. Beats me. And that is the end of Chapter 9 in Last Days. Taking another look just to see what the next chapter is, because that was a very short chapter, and this next one's going to be short. It's going to be another short chapter as well. Hope you all are enjoying this book. We will go ahead. Okay. We'll go ahead and continue reading Last Days, Chapter 10. Caen, Normandy, June 16th, 2011, 5 a.m. There was no sun, only a forever black cloud reaching from horizon to horizon above dark water and the dusty plain before it. Nothing grew there. A cold wind gusted across the gray dust, the ash and cinders, the still water. His arrival in the emptiness did not go unnoticed, because the raggedy figures upon the briny shore, where the oily waters lapped and fizzed and lapped and fizzed, raised themselves up wearily and onto the thin legs, draped in remnants of cloth. The slender arms of these shabby silhouettes were raised to the sky, and from unseen mouths came a faint wail. There were no birds in the air. They formed a terrible flotsam upon the tide of the dead water. In their thousands they surged and flopped, a black flock of feather and bone, upon which the raggedy men descended to scoop them up with the scarecrow parts, and to offer them like treasures brought to a king by beggars. Kyle came out of a dream, his face strewn with dried tears. He had been dreaming for hours, but only remembered the last scene of some awful torment that ended by a great dead sea. But he did not wake fully. Could not have done. Bewildered by his passage from such strange sights and confused by the unlit space about him, he could not understand where he was. There was a room in the distance, its door ajar. A thin brown light flickered around the outline of the doorway. From its rapid stutters, the vague odor of things burned and still burning pulsed. Bonfire smells of autumn, the crackle of kindling damp with cold rain, the doused steam of blackened meats, the chill of wet stone. He tried to move, but the thought failed to become motion. There was no feeling in his limbs, just a numbness, a vacancy inside his joints. His breath failed to come out in more than shallow sucks and pants at the blackness before his eyes, as if some weight pressed upon his windpipe, or maybe the chambers of his lungs were now too small for the task set them. An absence of more than light hovered in the wings of his mind, like a descent into the great cold depths of lightless oceans beneath ice caps and skies without stars. A curious, unbreathable gravity pulled him down, and down, and down, through himself, then out of himself. Struggling against the nothingness that tried to snuff out the little ember of his frantic awareness, he was suddenly and profoundly and absurdly aware of his hands, his feet. They seemed to redefine themselves from out of the darkness, without so much as a twitch. But he knew from their size and weight and unfamiliar lengths of finger and thumb that they were not his hands, nor were these his feet. Too thin and long, the cumbersome, lifeless feet hung over the mattress as if his body had outgrown the bed of a child. Within a sense of his own face, different contours of cheek, bone, and forehead, and small mouth, and longer teeth suggested themselves. Long hair curled wiggish across his brow, about his jaw. It stank. It was oily, unwashed, dipped in spoiled water, rank upon the stained and musty pillow that cradled his skull. He couldn't see it, but he knew the pillowcase was patterned with continents of age stains. He sank further into the darkness beneath the unfamiliar body that had tremulously held him. like it tried to hold on to smoke within outspread fingers, sank deeper in the void, where the distant chaos of bird calls and the cries of men swirled around. Far off, but approaching, all attracted to his helpless, sinking paralysis, his dropping off and away, and the swirling of his cacophony was driven from the screams of an animal within his heart. Swine bellows and guttural bleats rose from shaky jowls in a large mouth. A black tongue and yellow teeth, wet, close. And then he woke and dropped, fell from the air, but no more than a few inches onto a bed, where he bounced and snapped upright in a seizure that electrified his body into a sense of its former shape, its dimensions, its familiarity. In the room. Hotel room. Caen, France. He looked to his right and saw nothing. Raked his hands out to the sides and upwards. Was blind. Tried not to scream. Then saw a little LED light wink against the wall. The phone charger. Another. A red speck in the lightless space up in the air. On the far side of the room, the standby light on the wall-mounted television. The grinding, fleshy machinery of grunts and buzzsaw whines made the air in his chest vibrate, made the darkness too alien for any thought of relief. Whoa, that sound. Snoring. Only Dan. Thank you, Lord. Dan drunk and snoring like an oaf. Lurching and falling from the bed, he scrabbled to his feet and staggered into the darkness. Arms outstretched, fingers fanned. He found a plaster wall. Why is it so dark? The temple. The air of the temple is still inside your eyes. He nearly screamed. Blackout curtains. He remembered closing them the night before. They had them in hotels to cut out ambient light. That's why it's so dark. Relief sang through him. The dream, the nightmare, faded like a dim and incorrectly remembered photograph. Excuse me. That's all it was and nothing more. The fingers upon the walls of the temple. Gabriel's terrible accident. Half a bottle of spirits, exhaustion, was an unfamiliar bed in a pitch-black room. Dan snoring. Another country. Another world. Too much. Too much. That's why he'd had a nightmare. But why had he dropped onto his bed from out of the very air? That was new. He'd never experienced that before. Part of the dream, like when you step off a curb, the jolt, a shock. He clasped his hands together, rubbed them. They were his very own hands, and these were his feet, broad with bony toes. His hair was shaggy, but straight, not curly, and unfamiliar like some mannequin's wig. His mouth was dry like it had been open for hours, and thirst burned inside his body. In the bathroom, he stared at himself under the welcome explosion of vanilla light before the spotless mirror. Confirmed himself with his blue-green eyes that girlfriends had loved. Shook the last traces of limb disclosure, of bone confusion, of flesh dysmorphia from his mind. Gulped at the silvery clean water that gushed from the tap, raised his wet face and turned back to the darkened doorway that led into the room, and the bed he did not want to sleep in anymore. But turning toward the door, he glimpsed something in the mirror. A smudgy reflection of a mark on the wall opposite the wash basin. Kyle turned, moved to the series of dirty streaks above the towel rack. shivered from what he assured himself was the cold of the tiles beneath his naked soles, tingling up his legs and across the goosing flesh, and not because of what assumed the outline of a bony thing with four skeletal legs on the wall. No, now he was closer. It looked more like the imprint of a hand, with four thin fingers curled inward at the last joint, cupping or pulling as if from beyond the wall. A sudden whiff of old meat, like the moist underside of a pork chop he'd left for too long in his fridge at home, assailed his sinuses. He looked down at the towels. For an incriminating stain, they were fresh, clean, unused tan towels, and under the yellow light of the hotel bathroom, his blinking bafflement broke into comprehension of where he had smelled and seen such things before. And that is the end of chapter 10 in Last Days. Taking a quick look again, just to make sure. We might go ahead and just take a break, because I want to see how far this next chapter is, because we're going to be on chapter 11. Yeah, 91, 20 pages. That might be... Yeah, the pace we're going at might be a stretch, so we'll go ahead and what we'll do... As much as I don't want to stop reading, we'll go ahead and pause it. We'll pause it tonight, that way we have more time to do it next week. And this will be just a short video for right now, as well as I'm getting tired, as well as recovering from last night. These past few days I've been feeling not myself, but it's getting better. Anywho, on top of it, it's raining, and it's just been one crazy thing after the next. Anywho, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's video. If you're liking this book, please go ahead and comment down below. Please like and give this video a thumbs up, and press the bell icon to subscribe to my channel for more videos of Last Days, of the of Christian books like Lecrae, kids books like A Series of Unfortunate Events. So I hope you all are enjoying this book, and I hope you all have a fantastic evening. Until then, I'm the Epileptic Explorer, and I hope you all have a fantastic evening.